They tried to throw me out of my own country club. That's when I decided they needed to learn exactly who owned the ground they stood on. I pulled into the circular driveway of Madison Estate Country Club in my 10-year-old Honda Civic, watching the valet's face flicker with barely concealed disdain as I handed him my keys. The same expression I had seen 1,000 times before, the same judgment I had learned to wear like a second skin. 28 years of being the family disappointment had taught me to recognize contempt in all its subtle variations, and the young man in the crisp burgundy uniform was practically radiating it as he glanced from my car to the line of Mercedes and BMWs waiting behind me. The October sun was still warm on my shoulders as I walked toward the grand entrance, my simple cotton dress and flat shoes drawing looks from the impeccably dressed members scattered across the manicured lawns. I could feel their eyes cataloging every detail, measuring me against their standards and finding me wanting. It should have bothered me more than it did. 5 years ago, it would have. But I had learned something important in those 5 years, something my mother and sister would never understand. I had learned that being underestimated was the most powerful weapon a person could have. Madison Estate sprawled across 200 acres of prime Connecticut real estate, all rolling hills and pristine golf greens, tennis courts that had hosted state championships, and a main clubhouse that looked like it had been transplanted directly from an English manor house. Old money clung to every brick and blade of grass. The kind of place where memberships were inherited, not purchased, where your last name mattered more than your bank account, though having both certainly helped. My father had joined 30 years ago when he was building his construction company, back when Madison Estate was still accepting new members if you had the right connections and enough cash. It was one of his proudest achievements, getting that acceptance letter. He used to bring me here when I was little, before everything changed, before my mother decided that only Claire was worth investing in. I spotted them immediately as I entered the main dining room, impossible to miss even in the lunch crowd. My mother, Patricia Thompson, held court at a table near the floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the 18th hole, her blonde hair styled in perfect waves, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. She was laughing at something one of her friends had said, that practiced social laugh she had perfected over decades of playing the role of Connecticut society matron. Next to her sat my sister Claire, 30 years old and absolutely radiant in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She had her hand possessively wrapped around the arm of a man I recognized from the club newsletter as Richard Ashford, whose family had been members here for 3 generations. They saw me approaching and the laughter died. Claire's eyes swept over me from head to toe, and I watched her mouth curve into that familiar smirk, the one that said she had already won before the game even started. My mother's face tightened, her lips pressing into a thin line of disapproval that I knew so well it felt like coming home. "Oh, you finally made it," Claire said loudly enough that the neighboring tables could hear. "I was starting to think you got lost somewhere in your neighborhood." She emphasized the last word like it was something dirty, something shameful. The implication was clear. My apartment in downtown Hartford, convenient for my work and perfectly comfortable, was somehow beneath contempt compared to Claire's sprawling house in West Hartford that our mother had helped her buy. I slid into the empty chair across from them, setting my simple canvas bag on the floor. My mother looked at it like I had brought a garbage bag to the table. "Good Lord, Emily," she said, her voice dripping with mortification. "You came here looking like you just crawled out of a laundromat. Don't you know that events at Madison Estate are always high society affairs? This is a tea party for the elite, not some casual get-together at a diner." Claire's friends, 3 women I vaguely recognized from previous humiliations, giggled behind their hands. One of them, a redhead in pearls, whispered something to the woman next to her while staring directly at me. I had become very good at pretending not to notice these things. I picked up the menu, scanning it with casual interest. I came here to enjoy lunch, not to audition for a fashion show. Besides, no one needs to dress up in their own house. The comment landed exactly as I intended it to, creating a moment of confused silence. My mother waved it away like I was speaking nonsense, which I suppose from her perspective I was. Claire turned back to Richard, dismissing me entirely, which was also part of the pattern. I was the family embarrassment, the daughter who had failed to marry well, failed to understand the importance of appearances, failed to be anything other than a disappointing reminder of wasted potential. "We have the most wonderful news," Claire announced, and I watched as she held out her left hand where a diamond the size of a small planet caught the light. "Richard proposed last night. We're engaged." The table erupted in congratulations and squeals of delight. My mother looked like she might actually cry from happiness, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. Richard smiled indulgently, accepting the attention with the ease of someone who had been groomed for this kind of life since birth. He was handsome in that generic way that came from good genes and better dental work, his suit tailored perfectly, his watch probably worth more than my car. "We're planning to have the engagement party here at the club, of course," Claire continued, her voice rising with excitement. "Richard's family has been members for 3 generations. His grandfather was actually president of the board of directors back in the 80s. can you imagine? We're thinking sometime in November, before the holidays get too busy. Just an intimate gathering of 150 or so of our closest friends and family. She said this while looking directly at me, and I could see the challenge in her eyes. This was her moment, her triumph, and I was meant to feel small in comparison. My mother reached over to squeeze Claire's hand, her face glowing with pride. "We're so fortunate to have membership here," my mother said, though she was looking at me when she said it. "Thanks to your father, of course. Otherwise, we would never have access to a place like this." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Thanks to my father, who had died 5 years ago, leaving behind his construction company, his investments, and his country club membership. Thanks to my father, who they claimed to honor while conveniently forgetting that I was his daughter too. Claire leaned into Richard, her hand on his chest, playing the part of the devoted fiancé with practiced ease. She kissed his cheek, laughing at something he whispered in her ear, making sure everyone could see how happy they were, how perfect their life was going to be. The performance was flawless. I had to give her credit for that. The conversation turned to wedding plans, to venues and flowers and guest lists that seemed to grow longer with every passing minute. My mother and Claire traded ideas back and forth like tennis balls, each suggestion more elaborate than the last. Richard contributed occasionally, but mostly he seemed content to let Claire orchestrate their future, which was probably wise. My sister had been planning her perfect wedding since she was 6 years old. She had binders full of magazine clippings and Pinterest boards that could crash a server. I ate my salad and said nothing, which was also part of the pattern. I had learned years ago that my opinions were not welcome at these family gatherings. I was there to be seen, to fill a seat, to serve as a cautionary tale about what happened when you did not prioritize the right things in life. My successful career in data analytics, the company I had built from nothing, the financial independence I had fought for, none of it mattered because it did not come with a prestigious husband, or a house in the right neighborhood, or the kind of social connections my mother valued above everything else. Now, about the guest list, Claire said, and something in her tone made me look up from my plate. She had that expression on her face, the one that preceded something particularly cruel. "Emily, sweetie, I need to talk to you about something." I set down my fork and waited. My mother was watching me with barely concealed anticipation, like she was about to witness something entertaining. "You know how important this engagement party is for Richard's career," Claire continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "It's not just a celebration, it's a networking opportunity. All of his major clients will be there, potential partners, influential people in the legal community. We need to make absolutely the right impression." I could see where this was going, but I let her continue. "The cruelty was always worse when you tried to fight it. And you," she said, gesturing vaguely at me with one perfectly manicured hand, "with your style choices and your computer job that no one really understands and your tiny apartment in the city. Well, you would be something of a liability. We can't risk you undermining everything we've worked so hard to build." My mother jumped in before I could respond. "What Claire is trying to say, Emily, is that you just would not fit in with the crowd we're trying to attract. These are sophisticated people, successful people. They expect a certain standard, and frankly, you fall short of that standard in almost every measurable way." The women at the table, Claire's friends, nodded in agreement. One of them actually laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the ambient noise of the dining room. I felt my face grow hot, but I kept my expression neutral. Years of practice had taught me how to hide the hurt, how to swallow the anger and smile like nothing was wrong. "So you're not inviting me to your engagement party?" I said, my voice carefully level. Claire had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, but only slightly. "Don't be dramatic, Emily. It's just this one event. The wedding. Of course you'll be invited to the wedding. We'll make sure there's a seat for you in the back row somewhere." She waved her hand dismissively toward the rear of an imaginary venue, the gesture making it clear exactly how much my presence would be valued. I picked up my water glass, ice clinking against the sides, and took a slow sip. My eyes moved across each face at the table, landing finally on my mother and sister. I let myself smile, just a small curve of my lips, the kind of smile that meant nothing and everything at once. "How generous of you," I said quietly. My mother relaxed slightly, probably thinking I was going to accept this latest humiliation with my usual grace. That I would nod and smile and pretend it did not matter that my own sister was excluding me from one of the most important events of her life because I was an embarrassment to the family image, that I would go home to my unacceptable apartment in my unremarkable car and continue to be the daughter they wished they could forget. The rest of lunch passed in a blur of wedding talk and social gossip. I finished my meal mechanically, barely tasting the food, my mind already racing ahead to what would come next, because this was not over. Not by a long shot. They had pushed me too far this time, and they were about to learn that there were consequences to treating someone like they were worthless. After the plates were cleared and coffee was served, my mother announced that she and Claire needed to look at the ballroom for the engagement party. They stood up, gathering their designer handbags, chattering about centerpieces and lighting. I stood as well, ready to leave, ready to put this whole miserable afternoon behind me. That was when Claire turned to me with that look on her face, the one that said she had one more knife to twist. "Emily, do me a favor," she said, her voice loud enough to carry to the surrounding tables. "When you leave, could you please use the side entrance? We have some of Richard's colleagues here today, and I really don't want them to see someone dressed like a homeless person walking out the front door of Madison Estate. It would reflect poorly on our family." The request hung in the air like a slap. Around us, I could feel people turning to look, drawn by the spectacle. My mother nodded in agreement, her face stern. "She's right, Emily. It's embarrassing enough that you showed up looking like this. The least you can do is have the decency to leave discreetly, go out through the service entrance. Please try not to make more of a scene than you already have." Something inside me went very still and very cold. I looked at my sister, at her expensive dress and her smug expression, at the engagement ring she wore like a badge of superiority. I looked at my mother, at the woman who had spent the last decade making it clear that I was the daughter who did not measure up, who did not matter, who was tolerated out of obligation and nothing more. "No," I said simply, "I'm not using the side entrance." Claire's eyes widened slightly, surprised by my refusal. She was not used to me pushing back, not used to me having a spine. Neither of them were. "Excuse me?" my mother said, her voice sharp with warning. I said no. "I'll leave when I'm ready, and I'll use whatever door I choose." Claire's face flushed with anger. She looked around the dining room, clearly aware that people were watching now, that her perfect image was being threatened by her difficult sister. She caught the eye of a security guard standing near the entrance, a middle-aged man named Mike who I had seen around the club for years. "Security?" Claire called out, her voice rising to a pitch that made several diners look up from their meals. "Could you please escort this woman out of here? She's not a member, and she's causing a disturbance." Mike walked over slowly, his face uncertain. He looked at me, then at Claire, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Ma'am, Don't ma'am me," Claire snapped. "This woman does not belong here. She's making the club look bad, and I want her removed immediately. Use force if you have to." A small crowd was gathering now, pulled by the drama unfolding in the middle of the elegant dining room. I could see phones coming out, people recording what they assumed would be a scene worthy of their social media feeds. A woman being thrown out of an exclusive country club was exactly the kind of content that went viral. My mother stood beside Claire, her arms crossed, her expression one of righteous indignation. "This is completely unacceptable, Emily. You're making fools of all of us. Just go quietly before you cause any more damage." Mike looked at me apologetically. "Miss, I don't want any trouble. Maybe it would be best if..." "If what, Mike?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "If I let them humiliate me one more time? If I slink out the back door like I'm something to be ashamed of?" Before he could answer, a new voice cut through the tension. "What exactly is going on here?" Everyone turned to see David Morrison, the club's general manager, walking toward us with the measured pace of someone who was very much in control of the situation. He was in his early 60s, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, his silver hair combed back from a face that managed to look both distinguished and approachable. I had met him several times over the years, though my mother and sister had no idea about the nature of those meetings. Claire immediately launched into her version of events, her voice taking on that performative quality she used when she wanted to seem like the victim. "Mr. Morrison, thank goodness you're here. This woman has been disrupting our lunch, and now she's refusing to leave when asked. She's not even a member of the club. I don't know how she got in here, but she's clearly not the type of person who belongs at Madison Estate." David looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made me want to smile. Respect, concern, and perhaps a touch of amusement at what was about to unfold. "There seems to be a significant misunderstanding here," he said carefully. Claire cut him off, her confidence growing. "There's no misunderstanding. This is Emily Thompson, my sister, and she doesn't have membership privileges. My mother and I are members through my late father's account, but Emily has nothing to do with this club. She needs to leave, and she needs to do it now before she embarrasses us any further." David turned to face Claire fully, and when he spoke, his voice carried enough authority to silence the murmuring crowd. "Miss Thompson, your sister Emily is indeed associated with this club. In fact, she holds membership number 1024, which she inherited from your late father 5 years ago upon his passing." I watched the color drain from Claire's face. My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "What?" they said in unison, the word barely more than a whisper. David continued, his tone professional but firm. "Not only that, but the memberships held by both Patricia Thompson and Claire Thompson are dependent memberships, registered under Emily Thompson's primary account. All fees, including annual dues, dining charges, guest privileges, and access to club facilities for the past 5 years, have been paid by Emily Thompson's account." The crowd around us had grown larger, drawn by the spectacle. Phones were everywhere now, recording every moment. I could see the shock rippling through the onlookers, could hear the whispers starting to build. This was better than any soap opera, and they knew it. Claire was shaking her head, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. That's impossible. Emily is just a data analyst. She works with computers. She drives a beat-up Honda. She lives in a tiny apartment. There's no way she could afford. And there's more, David said, cutting through her protests. Madison Estate Country Club was purchased by Thompson Holdings LLC 3 years ago. The sale was kept quiet at the request of the new owner, who preferred to maintain the club's traditional management structure and public image. He paused, letting the words sink in. Emily Thompson is the sole owner of Thompson Holdings LLC. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that comes right before an explosion, the moment when everyone realizes that something fundamental has shifted and nothing will ever be the same again. What he's saying, David continued, looking directly at my mother and sister, is that Emily Thompson doesn't just own the membership you've been using. She owns this entire club. The buildings, the grounds, the golf course, every single blade of grass you're standing on belongs to her. My mother swayed on her feet, reaching out to grab the back of a chair for support. Claire had gone completely white, her perfect makeup suddenly looking garish against her pale skin. Richard, who had been silent throughout this entire exchange, was staring at me like he had never seen me before. I stepped forward, and the crowd parted automatically, giving me space. I looked at my mother and my sister, these two women who had spent years making me feel small, making me feel worthless, using me and discarding me and never once wondering if there might be more to me than what they chose to see. That's right, I said, my voice clear and strong. This place, the one you just tried to have me thrown out of, belongs to me. Every square inch of it. Claire was making small sounds of distress, her hands clutching at Richard's arm like she was drowning, and he was the only thing keeping her afloat. My mother had tears running down her face, ruining her perfect makeup, but I felt no sympathy. They had never shown me any. The computer job you love to mock, I continued, is a data analytics firm I founded 6 years ago. We handle financial modeling for some of the largest investment funds in the world. Last year alone, my company generated over $300 million in revenue. That tiny apartment in the city that you think is so shameful? It's a penthouse in a building I own, strategically located to minimize my commute and maximize my efficiency. And my reliable Honda? I don't need to prove my worth with expensive cars because I know my value isn't tied to what I drive. I paused, making sure they were really hearing me, really understanding what they had done. I tried to tell you, I said, my voice softer now but no less powerful. I invited you to my company launch party 5 years ago. You said you were too busy. I told you about the real estate investments I was making. You laughed and said I was wasting my money. I tried to share my successes with you, but you had already decided who I was, and nothing I said could change your minds. You saw what you wanted to see. A disappointment. A failure. Someone to be hidden away and ashamed of. But why didn't you tell us? Claire whispered, her voice breaking. Why did you let us think you were struggling? I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but pity. You never asked. You never cared. All you cared about was whether I made you look good, whether I fit into your idea of what success should look like. I paid for your memberships here, covered every expense, and you still treated me like garbage. I wanted to see if there would ever come a time when you valued me for who I am, rather than what I could do for your image. I guess I have my answer. David Morrison cleared his throat gently. Miss Thompson, what would you like me to do? The question hung in the air. Everyone was looking at me now, waiting to see what would happen next. My mother and sister stared at me with expressions of dawning horror, finally understanding that they had pushed the wrong person too far. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that they were frozen, unable to do anything but wait for my judgment. I smiled, and it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had been pushed down one too many times and had finally decided to push back. Revoke their memberships, I said clearly. Both of them. Effective immediately. Claire let out a strangled cry, her legs giving out beneath her. Richard caught her, but he was looking at me with something like fear in his eyes, probably already calculating how this would affect his career, his connections, his carefully planned future with a woman who had just lost everything that made her valuable to his social circle. My mother was sobbing openly now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks. Emily, please, you can't do this. Please, we're family. We made a mistake. We're sorry. No, I said flatly. You're not sorry. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry there are consequences. But you're not sorry for how you treated me, because you still think you were right to be ashamed of me. You just wish I hadn't turned out to be someone you should have been proud of all along. I turned to David. Also, please notify all affiliated country clubs in the region, as well as the management of any clubs where Richard's family holds memberships. that Patricia Thompson and Claire Thompson have been permanently banned from Madison Estate Country Club for harassment, verbal abuse of a member, and misuse of membership privileges. David nodded, his expression neutral but his eyes showing a hint of satisfaction. He had been managing this club for 20 years, and he had seen his share of entitled members who needed to be taken down a peg. As you wish, Miss Thompson. I'll have the notifications sent out within the hour. I looked at my sister one last time, at her tear-stained face and her shaking hands, at the engagement ring that suddenly seemed like it might not mean what she thought it meant anymore. You wanted me to leave through the side door? You wanted to hide me away like I was something shameful? Well, now you get to leave through the side door of your own life. See how it feels. I turned to Richard, who was still supporting my sister's weight, and about that engagement party? I'm sure Richard will be absolutely thrilled to learn that his fiancée just tried to have the owner of his chosen venue forcibly removed from her own property. I'm sure that will do wonders for his career. Good luck with that, Claire. The final words I had were from my mother, the woman who had given birth to me but had never really been a mother to me, not in the ways that mattered. Dad used to tell me something before he died. He would say, "Emily, you never need anyone's permission to be extraordinary." He saw it in me, even when no one else did. He left me everything because he knew I would use it wisely, that I would honor his legacy by building something meaningful. You and Claire, you were so busy chasing status and approval that you never stopped to see what he saw. That's not my failure, that's yours. I turned on my heel and walked toward the main entrance, the crowd parting before me like I was royalty. The murmurs followed me, a wave of shocked whispers and excited speculation. I could hear fragments of conversation, people already spreading the story, already turning this into the scandal that would dominate country club gossip for months to come. Behind me, I heard the security guards politely but firmly asking my mother and sister to leave. I heard Claire's protests, my mother's continued sobbing, and Richard's low voice trying to calm them both down. I did not look back. There was nothing behind me worth seeing anymore. My Honda was waiting at the main entrance, the valet having brought it around when he saw me approaching. The same young man who had looked at my car with such disdain now handed me the keys with a respectful nod, his eyes wide with the knowledge of who I really was. I tipped him generously, because I could afford to be generous, and because his shocked expression was worth every penny. I slid into the driver's seat, the familiar worn leather a comfort after the sterile elegance of the club. Through the rearview mirror, I could see them being escorted out through a narrow service entrance on the side of the building, the same one they had wanted me to use. The indignity of it was perfect, poetic justice in its purest form. My phone buzzed with a text from David Morrison. "Miss Thompson, the board of directors would like to extend an invitation for you to serve as our new honorary chairman, replacing the position previously held by Richard's grandfather. Please let us know at your convenience if you would be interested in accepting." I read the message twice, then smiled and tossed my phone onto the passenger seat. The engine of my reliable Honda purred to life, and I pulled out of the circular driveway, past the manicured lawns and the golf greens and the tennis courts that all belonged to me. Every beautiful, exclusive, ridiculously expensive inch of them. In my rearview mirror, Madison Estate Country Club grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely, along with the last remnants of the daughter who had spent so many years trying to earn love from people who were never going to give it. That girl was gone now, left behind in a service exit with all the other things that did not matter anymore. I pressed down on the accelerator and drove toward my real life, the one I had built with my own hands and my own mind and my own refusal to accept anyone else's definition of what I should be. My phone buzzed again with incoming messages, probably from David with more details, or maybe from friends who had already heard about what happened through the incredibly efficient country club gossip network. But I did not check it. Not yet. For now, I just drove, the autumn sun warm on my face through the windshield, the road ahead clear and open, and full of possibilities that had nothing to do with country clubs or family obligations, or the crushing weight of other people's expectations. I had spent 28 years trying to be enough for them. It had taken me this long to realize that I had always been enough. They were the ones who were lacking, who were too small-minded and too status-obsessed to see the value in anything that did not fit their narrow definition of success. The day I reclaimed my worth was the day I stopped needing them to give it to me, and that freedom, that absolute liberation from caring what they thought, was worth more than every acre of Madison Estate, more than every membership and every dinner and every moment I had spent trying to earn their love. I was done trying. I was done hoping they would change. I was done being the daughter who did not measure up, because the truth was, they were the ones who had never measured up to me. And now they knew it too.